that was a little bit confusing because a lot of families thought, well, that's what I need to pay to go to that college, but that's not the case at all. This will just determine, based on that number, what you're eligible for. Like I said, it's filed at studentaid.gov. Once you're in that site, both the student and at least one parent, sometimes two parents, need to create a login, create an account, a username and password. And I always really encourage the student to start the process and then invite their parent to fill out their portion of the FAFSA. It needs to be completed annually. The FAFSA will always look at, as far as income, or they'll look at the previous tax year. So if we're finding the 26-27 FAFSA, they're going to be the federal government's going to be looking at the 24 tax year. So just be aware that it's always the previous tax year. When they ask about assets, they're looking at what you currently have as of the day you file the FAFSA. So be aware of that. But free application for federal student aid. Financial need. You heard me say, if you have financial needs, you may qualify for certain financial aid, certain scholarships, certain grants, certain loans. Financial need. I did talk about the cost of attendance. Every school has their own cost of attendance. It could range from, $20,000 up to maybe over $100,000. That might be a cost of attendance of certain schools. Financial need is that cost of attendance minus your SAI that the student receives. For example, let me give you this scenario. Augustana's cost of attendance, this is indirect costs, just around $60,000. So if you have a SAI of $20,000, you have, in that scenario, your student has initial financial need of about $40,000, using those numbers. Now, if you go to a school that has a cost of attendance of $30,000, and you have that same SAI of $20,000, you'll have a initial financial need of $10,000. Did I do the math right? 30 minus 20. You'll have financial need of $10,000 at that point. So in some places you'll have potentially no financial need. Other institutions you will have much greater financial need. And that's going to be initial financial need. There's also remaining financial need. Remaining financial need, going back to that first scenario where I talked about where you had $30,000 of initial financial need. After you've had scholarships and grants, let's say Augustana awarded your student $20,000 in an academic scholarship, and that's all your students receive in that scenario. It's not the case. But if that were the case, you would subtract your $20,000 scholarship minus your initial financial need, and now in that scenario you'll still have $10,000 of remaining financial need, which will open you up for additional need-based grants, scholarships, subsidized loan, and others. So that's how when the federal government uses the word, or a college uses the word financial need, that's what they're talking about. Everybody has financial need. A full Pell Grant would be awarded to students that have a 0 SAI all the way down to a negative 1,500. The Federal Supplemental Education Opportunity Grant, short, you'll often hear the term SEOG, that's what it stands for. If you qualify for a federal Pell Grant, very likely will you have an additional grant, a Supplemental Education Opportunity Grant, that'll range from $100 up to $3,000 or $4,000 based on the discretion of the institution and how it can fit into your aid package. The third grant program, or maybe scholarship, if they use the word grant, is a TEACH grant. Again, an acronym for Teacher Education Assistance for College and Higher Education. Teachers are becoming a high need field throughout through the country. So that's $4,000 per year that you can request to have a TEACH grant. Now you need to be majoring in education in a high need field within education. That might be accounting. Most of the STEM programs are high need field. But if your students looking to go into education, look into the TEACH grant. There's an obligation that you teach in that high need field and also in a low income school district. And if you fulfill that obligation, then it remains a grant. If you don't fulfill the obligation, you have to pay that grant back in a loan. There's the different loan programs. I'm going to move to the federal direct student loan. As an incoming freshman or first-year student, you will be eligible for $5,500 in a direct loan. As a sophomore, you'll be eligible for $6,500, and a junior and senior, you're eligible for $7,500 in a federal direct loan. This loan will be in the student's name, so you will be building credit, which is a great thing if you do utilize that loan once your payment begins. Based on financial need, or I'll say remaining financial need, as a freshman, $3,500 can be subsidized. You'll always have at least that $2,000 unsubsidized, and I'll say what that means exactly in just a minute. As a sophomore, you'll have the potential eligibility of $4,500 in subsidized loan. As a junior and senior, $5,500 can be subsidized based on financial need. If you see the word subsidized in your student's financial aid package, you'll know that subsidized interest, that means interest will not be accruing on that loan while your student's in college. You have a 6-month grace period after graduation, and then that's when your payment begins, and then that's when interest will begin on that loan. Yes, if you can defer that loan while you're in grad school, and the subsidized portion while you're in grad school will not be accruing interest. If you receive an unsubsidized loan, or everyone will be offered at least $2,000 unsubsidized, maybe all $5,500 will be unsubsidized. Know that interest will be accruing on that loan while you're in college. So just right now, for this current academic year, I think the interest rate for the federal direct loan program is 6.39. I think that's what it is. They haven't set the interest rate for the 26-27 school year. I expect it to go down a little bit. This is as high as it's ever been, but that's where the current year's interest rate is. Whether it's subsidized or not, just knowing that your subsidized portion, that won't start to accrue until 6 months after you graduate. Then there's the federal PLUS loan. PLUS loan stands for Parent Loan for Undergraduate Students. So you as a parent can borrow on behalf of your child in your name, the parent's name. That loan will be in your name, and you can borrow up to the cost of attendance minus their other financial aid. So it is a great option. I think the interest rate is even a little bit higher on the PLUS loan. I think this current year it's just under 9%. There are private loans out there that if you have strong credit, you can get as low as 3% right now, private educational loans. So you might want to look into those as well. But there are potentially some benefits borrowing from the federal government. Then the last area that the federal government offers aid is the federal work-study program. These are jobs on campus funded by the federal government. You do need financial need or remaining financial need to be eligible for federal work-study. Now, even if you're not eligible, you should inquire with your college to see if there are other jobs that aren't funded by the federal government, and most of the times there are. So just because you don't qualify for a federal work-study position, there's still some opportunity at most universities to still work while on campus if you're looking for that. Any questions? It's a fixed rate. All the federal loans have a fixed rate, although each year that rate might be different for that year, depending on what year you borrow from. They set those rates each year. Some key change, the federal government tweaks the FAFSA a little bit each year. If you happen to be here last year, I talked about things that have changed since then, but there are, key changes. One being FAFSA identification process. Last year I was telling everyone to create a login, create an account as soon as possible. They had to verify your identity, and you couldn't create an account and then go directly into the FAFSA, or if you did, there'd be some hang-ups. But now, you don't need that 3-day or longer wait to verify your identity. So you can just create an account and move directly into the FAFSA. It'll be very streamlined. So that's one definite improvement. They've also, we had a lot of errors of the student entering in their parents' information, and maybe you had to enter in your parents' social security number, and maybe they typed it off by one letter or one number, and that became an issue, or they had a birth date wrong. But now all the student needs is their parents' email, and they can invite their parent to fill out their portion of the FAFSA. There's a few more steps last year, but they've simplified that as well. A couple of years ago, the federal government made a change where if you were a small business owner or owned a family farm, that business or that farm became an asset, and you had to report the value of that business and farm. I personally have heard a lot of South Dakota families. They took that back out, so no longer you have to report the value of your small business or your family farm that you live on. You have to be living on that farm where you go, and so you wouldn't need to report it. And then one thing that they did change with the PLUS loan is, I think I misspoke, I said you could borrow up to the cost of attendance. Now they did limit it to $20,000 per year per student, with a lifetime maximum per student of $65,000. Go ahead. Well, the PLUS loan, correct. It's going to really go to the private loans. Yeah, and I did add this because I'm talking to mostly undergraduate students. But any new grad student, the federal government now there is a graduate PLUS loan. That's not going to be available moving forward for new grad students. That is an issue, yes. That is, you do receive direct, the graduate student does receive some direct loans, obviously not the same cost, exactly. Yeah. So they'll be moving to private educational loans. Some other FAFSA tips that I think will be very helpful when you're filing the FAFSA is that first, you all need to give consent. So years ago, when I was a student, I remember we would work all day on the FAFSA, rounding up our incomes, our assets, and you would fill it all out. It's streamlined a lot since then. You just give consent, and then the IRS transfers it over to the Department of Ed, and it's all pre-filled out. You actually don't even see it. It just happens like that. You just give consent, and all of your tax information is inputted into your FAFSA, and it's a requirement to give consent. If your student comes from a divorced household, often the question is which parent should be the contributor or which parent should be filing the FAFSA. A few years ago, it was wherever the student lived, whoever the student lived with in the last calendar year. It's then switched to whatever parent provides the most financial support in this last calendar year. So the FAFSA will ask the student those questions, and then that will determine who the contributor is. Oftentimes, it's a 50-50 split. If that's the case, it's the parent with the higher adjusted gross income, if it's truly a 50-50 split. So that's how you determine which parent is on the FAFSA. Child support is now under an asset, so if you're receiving child support and you're the contributing parent, you report the value of the child support you received. And then family size, that's brought over from the IRS as well on your tax returns based on your dependents. Sometimes, remember, the FAFSA is looking at 2 years ago. Sometimes the family size changes in the meantime, but you're given the option to update that family size. If it hasn't changed, you'll just move on. Make sure you answer all the questions accurately. One of the biggest hang-ups or errors that happen on the FAFSA is there's a question about, did you earn any foreign income? So often, people will leave that blank, and it seems like that's okay, because I did. But you need to make sure you put zeros in and everything, or if it's dropped down not applicable, you'll put that in. But don't leave questions blank. Otherwise, you'll submit it. Each institution will receive that, and then we'll have an error code, and then we'll have to reach out to you to make that correction. The smoothest mode of operation, like I said, is have the student start first. There is a direction where the parent can start the FAFSA. It's harder to get them connected for whatever reason if the parent starts and then the student fills it out afterwards. In an ideal situation, you would be sitting right next to your student. They would be logging in, creating a username and password, sending an invite over to their parent, and the parent will be on their computer and seeing that invite and starting their portion. That's the ideal setting. But if you can have your student start the FAFSA and invite you as the parent to fill out their portion, that's going to be your smoothest operation of getting that completed. Going back to who is my parent. So if the student's parents are married, or even if they're not married but living together, you'll need to provide information for both parents. Going back just a little bit, if your parents file jointly, we'll only need one parent to create a username and an account. If your parents file taxes separately, both parents will need a FSA account. Divorced or separated, going back to provide, it's the parent who's provided more than half of the financial support, not who the student lives with. If the parents remarried, then that parent needs to be on the FAFSA as well. So be aware of that. Grandparents, foster parents, legal guardians are not parents. In most cases, that student will file independently if they don't have parents. Of course, unless the student's been legally adopted. If you're still confused, the federal government has a great website where it'll kind of walk you through if you're the contributing parent or not, or who the contributing parent is. It's called the Parent Wizard, and you've got that website there. Sometimes a student will say, well, my parents not going to help me with college. They're not in a position to be able to help me pay for anything in college. Why do I have to put them on the FAFSA? It's a good question, but you do, usually. It's a requirement. Unless you're 24, then you're considered independent in the eyes of the FAFSA. Not if you file taxes independently, but if you're 24 in the eyes of the FAFSA, you're an independent student. If you're a graduate student, most of your students here will not be. If your student's a veteran, or if they're married, or if they have their own dependent that they support. If they're an orphan or a ward of the court or in foster care, they don't put their parents' information down. Or if they're homeless or at risk of being homeless, you wouldn't put your parents down as well. The FAFSA will ask the student all of these questions, and they'll answer yes or no accordingly. Remember, I said that the federal government will ask both the student and the parent what their assets are, what are assets and what is not. Last year, like I said, the farms and small businesses were assets. Now they got flipped back over to the not asset side. Assets are, any child support received, that's fairly new. College savings plans. If you, the parent, for example, has a 529 savings plan, you have more than one child, and that's set up for all of your children. Let's say you have 2 children, you're just going to report the value or the amount that you have set aside for this child going to college. For example, you have $50,000 in your 529, 25 for child 1, 25,000 for child 2. Just report the amount set aside for this child. Land and real estate, not your primary home, are assets, so it's the value of the home minus what you owe, or the value of the land or home, second home, minus what you owe against that property. These stocks and bonds are investments with the assets as well. Not any retirement plan question. All retirement plans. Vehicles, your primary home, again, don't report the value of your home. So another common question is, the FAFSA isn't, an accurate representation of my situation. Remember, it's a snapshot in time 2 years ago. Oftentimes, the situations may change. You may have changed your job, lost the job. There may have been a divorce since then. And so those are all things that each individual university will consider. It's a mandated process called special circumstances. Every university college has a special circumstance form where you will explain the situations, why they have changed, and then provide supporting documentation for that. Through that process, the financial aid office is able to make a professional judgment and go into your FAFSA and then change your answers or your values of income, things like that. But it's a fairly slightly drawn out process, but the colleges are really set up to help you get through that process if the FAFSA isn't an accurate, depiction of what's actually going on right now. These are all allowable situations where we in the financial aid office can make a professional judgment on your FAFSA. The one thing I want you to check into is how to compare offers. Oftentimes, a student will receive a great scholarship, $36,000 scholarship. You're really proud of your student, and rightfully so, you should be. They've earned it. It's all relative based on that cost, whether you're looking at direct cost, which I tend to say to look at, minus that scholarship. That initial cost is really high. What's your net price? You might receive only a $2,000 scholarship from a different university, but their costs are way less, like in school C. So you might consider that. What's got the better net price? School C does, even though you got this great honor $36,000 scholarship from this other university. So make sure you're comparing apples to apples. Sometimes there's some schools, they don't have on-campus housing and even meals at time, and so sometimes that net price is a lot lower, but now you have to start calculating in indirect costs because you're still paying for housing probably off campus or even at home. There's some housing expenses. So make sure you're really comparing apples to apples when you're comparing offers. My oldest son went across the country up to the West Coast to go to college, and in this scenario, comparing direct costs, we found some very comparable out-of-pocket expenses, but his travel costs are so much higher because we're flying him home or he's driving home 3-4 times a year. So when you're looking at overall costs, you might also want to put in indirect costs when you're making decisions financially on what the right university is. Some of your next steps: select a small your rank. There's the term called FAFSA verification. Randomly, the federal government's going to pick some individuals and ask the universities to verify that their information is accurate. Now, most of it is pulled over from the IRS, so we don't really have to verify that, but we do sometimes have to verify identity. We also have to verify family size. So if you're selected for verification, you've done nothing wrong. It's random. It's a very small portion, but some people are. So there's just one more step, and your institutions will get back to you that they just need to gather some more information. We'll let you know. Review and look at all the information provided on the websites. I think they're very helpful. Meet all deadlines. There's most schools will have many different scholarships, but so often there are sometimes early deadlines. I know at Augustana we have deadlines coming up here in November. So make sure you're checking all the deadlines for all your scholarship opportunities, whether it's institutional or outside scholarship deadlines. Find out how your schools are communicating to you. Are they mailing it via postal mail, your financial aid offer, or are they just emailing to you? Depending on the institution, both will, either or could happen, or sometimes both will happen. Sometimes a parent will ask, hey, did you get your financial aid offer in email yet? And they're like, no, it's sitting in your junk mail. Usually they're bigger envelopes, and sometimes it's the opposite. You're waiting for this postal mail to come through, but it's been in your email box since November. So just be aware of that, how they're going to communicate with you. For example, all of our incoming freshmen, we send in the postal mail. All of our returning students just get an email version of their renewed financial aid. And it goes just to the student, not the parent. So sometimes there's some miscommunication there. Processing dates can vary a lot. You'll find out when your schools are getting their financial aid offers. Some schools will wait till the first of the year before they send out any financial aid offers. Other schools are going to send them out ASAP. The FAFSA is open now, so you're able to fill out the FAFSA now. Some schools, as soon as they get the FAFSA, they're going to send out your financial aid offer within a week or even sooner. For Augustana, our goal is the end of October, where we hope to have our first offers out. But some schools are going to wait until January 1st. So just make sure you know what those dates are. Talk to your admissions counselor, financial aid office, and when you can maybe expect an offer. There are some certain reasons why a school will hold back from sending out that offer. If you are in line for like an audition scholarship, for example. If you're in for a music scholarship and you're potentially flagged for a music scholarship, we're going to wait until you audition for that scholarship before we send out your offer. For example, also like the NCAA, you can't sign at the earliest until mid-November. So if you're a student athlete, we're not going to send your offer out until after that signing date. So just be aware of when your offers will be in the mail or otherwise. If you do choose to utilize a federal loan, you will have to sign a master promissory note. That's the legal document that says you'll repay the loan. That's done online, very simple, but don't forget about that step or that loan will never be dispersed, along with required entrance counseling. That's required by the federal government. This is most times the student's first loan they've ever borrowed, and it just really educates them on what it means to have a loan, how that interest accrues, the different repayment plans, and so forth. All done online. Look for all your data. I think I've said that a few times. Like I said, the FAFSA is open now. The last 2 years, it had been delayed. Last year it was delayed till December 1st. 2 years ago, not until January 1st. So we were having a lot of families go on and get early estimates. So there still is the estimator. If you're not quite ready to file the FAFSA, but you just want to get a general idea of what you might qualify through the federal government, you can fill out the estimator form. It's real quick. It'll give you instant feedback or what you would qualify. It's all estimated, but it's a good resource. This is the landing page of what studentaid.gov looks like. You can see up in the right-hand side where it says login or create an account. That'll be your first stop, or it's actually down there too. The main page, sometimes the headlines change on this blue section. They'll update with something new, but it's going to look just like this. Some common mistakes is sometimes you'll answer a question wrong, and that changes everything what you're eligible for. This is probably the most common. Oftentimes a student will see this question and they'll read it differently in their head. The question is, are the student's parents refusing to provide information on this FAFSA form? And oftentimes it's easy to read, are the student's parents refusing to provide financial assistance to go to college? In the end, that's how many people read it. And they check, yes, that my parents are refusing to help pay for college. And that might be an accurate answer, but you answered the wrong question. Even though your parents might not be able to help or might be refusing to help you pay for college, they're likely not refusing to fill out their portion of the form. If they do actually refuse, and they will not, that student will only be eligible for an unsubsidized loan when there might be so much more available for that student. So parents really need to fill out their portion. You would answer yes. In fact, if you answer, or you would answer no, excuse me, you're not refusing. If you answer yes, you will get likely an email from that institution making sure you didn't make a mistake answering that questions, because it's so commonly answered mistakenly. The other big one is that checkbox right there. After you fill out your portion, if you don't hit that checkbox and just hit sign, it feels like you completed it, but we'll never get your results. So you need to make sure that's basically your consent, and then you sign it. So make sure you check that box, because it's unchecked when you scroll down to it. This is your very last step. Make sure you check that box and then hit sign. Not all the time, but often enough, someone will hit sign without checking that box, and the federal government lets it process through. And that's really it. I'm open for any questions right now in the big room, or if you have an individual question, definitely stop in here. If any questions come up, you've got our contact information. Just shoot us an email or ask for Greg over the phone, and we will do our very best to help. Questions? Anybody? Do I see any hands? We got a question here. Really, you just need your tax form. You need to know your Social Security number. You actually won't even need your tax form because you'll need to know your assets is what you'll need to know. If you consent, your taxes will be sent right over. If you're doing special circumstances, then you'll need your tax form. Right? Yeah, as of the day you're filling out the FAFSA, they're going to ask you what your assets are. And like I said, if you have any individual questions, you can definitely. Thanks for stopping, everybody. We'll see you all sometime.